really looking forward towards probably the next 10 years because that's where I think the big transformation is in store for us. I think whenever you land in the United States, you see the pace of things. Things happen pretty fast. If you're asking me, my biggest marker of intent is every discontinuity in their career journey, understanding the motivations behind that. It was very hard to build truck operator supply. First mission we've embarked upon is to really improve the life of truck operators, help them manage their business, help them go cashless, help them make more money. Drivers who are employed by the owner, like they can't steal fuel.
I want to go all the way back. You were at IIT in Chennai.
I was in Kharagpur.
You're in Kharagpur. Okay, sorry guys.
It's also a very important responsibility for the entrepreneur to be able to.
Welcome Rajesh. Welcome to our new humble office in San Francisco. It's lovely to see you here. From our lunches at what is it, Nasi and Me in Bangalore to now meeting here. It's lovely to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vaibhav, for having me over here, and look forward to our conversation.
Yeah. So Rajesh, first of all, tell us what is Blackbuck.
Yes. So Blackbuck is basically a very, I would say, purposeful and motivated attempt to really reimagine Indian trucking. India majority executes goods movement through road transportation, and it's a very large market. It's a $200 billion market in India. It's executed by small and medium truck businesses who own like 3 to 5 trucks each. We help in the direction of really trying to build the new avatar of Indian trucking. The first mission we've embarked upon is to really improve the life of truck operators, help them manage the business, help them go cashless, help them simplify operations, help them reduce leakages, make more money, expand their business. So it's an attempt to sort of really empower truck operators to help them manage the business and grow their earnings. So we basically help them with doing payments, help them do, control their operations, manage their driver using telematics. That's the second vertical. Third vertical, help them find loads, for their return loads wherever they are doing, and help them get access to loans to buy a new commercial vehicle. So that's Blackbuck, and yes, it's been 10 years we're building this, and I think getting stronger and stronger year by year, and really looking forward towards probably the next 10 years because that's where I think the big transformation is in store for us, and that's what Blackbuck
It's still proverbial day one as they.
Yeah. Truckers in India are largely like the uneducated lots. The first 10 years were really about getting them online. So I would say that the work we've done has solved them come online, use tech, and we do well. But I think that's what it is, a phase one. The phase two, which is the next 10 years, I think is about really leveraging the entire, the digital, I would say, power. They've come online. There's an app what they use. There's a very high engagement, and unlock like big categories and really create the shift of Indian trucking really going digital.
Interesting. And where is an emerging market like India on some of the more advanced, let's call it automated technologies, whether it's electrification, whether it's ADAS? Do you see a role in the next 10 years, or do you think that's further out?
Yeah. So basically, see, from this is essentially like the way things work. There are essentially two questions. One is really what's happening in the automotive tech, and what's happening in the operations of execution of truck, right? In the automotive tech, I think largely similar kind of developments as the Western world. I think we're seeing good enough movement for smaller vehicles. Let's say incrementally, we have 3-wheelers up to 350-500 kgs, which is 700 pounds, right? Which does a lot of intracity execution. 40 to 50% of incremental trucks sold in that segment is actually electric.
Okay, very cool.
Right?
So intracity, up to 1,000-pound load runs.
That's electric, but that's very small portion of the execution also.
Sure.
Because load size are very small. Then there is a dominant category of trucks which is up to like 1 ton capacity, 2 tons capacity. There's a very little, just the start of electrification there. It's not really yet taken off in that way, right? And nil in terms of the heavy capacity.
The intracity, yeah.
Because because the Indian trucking market, right, works a lot on the resale value of this asset.
Interesting.
Because 99% of the trucks are financed. So, if somebody is like, funding an asset, they really want to be assured of what's the terminal value, right? Because otherwise funding that, underwriting that becomes a problem, right? And the second thing is that even truckers, when they are taking the business of trucking, in India, leasing is not a phenomenon. They buy the truck. So the way it works is, let's say assuming 100 rupees, $100 is the cost of the truck, they put from their pocket 20, 80, they finance it. And when they're exiting this business, this 100 depreciates probably to 80 or 70. And when they sell this truck, they think about more as I've invested 20 rupees, $20. And when I'm selling it at $25, $80, I have like quadrupled my money and I'm exiting the business. So resale value is playing a big role in terms of really understanding the electrification of vehicles. So this is on the automotive side, right? How things are panning out. On the advancement in using tech to manage operations, India has a very low purchasing power. One of the very big verticals for Blackbuck is the area of telematics. In telematics, the deeply penetrated product is a vehicle tracking service. In the US, the average cost, or let's say average ARPU for, let's say, companies which give vehicle tracking service, which is more popular as ELDs, it's $30.
$30 per truck
Per month.
Okay.
In the European market, this number goes as high as $50, $75.
Okay.
Because they also do distance measurement for toll calculation, right? Now, so Western markets operate between $30 and like $70 for a vehicle tracking service product. In India, we figured out various different pricing frontiers. Nothing worked. What really worked is a $2.50 per truck per month pricing, right? So that's the purchasing power of the Indian ecosystem, Indian trucking ecosystem, right? The biggest ability to build this was because probably in the West, the reliabilities of these products, people expect 99.999, right? Because cost of repair is very high. In India, cost of repair is pretty low.
Very low.
Right? So we were able to re-engineer the device and build a device at more than 99.9 reliability. But if at all there is a repair, go and really address that, right? So hence, in telematics, the biggest penetrated product is only more a vehicle tracking device, which is also getting the tailwinds of government mandating it in various different geographies in the country, right? The next biggest lever, which we are essentially solving today using telematics, is that fuel is the largest expense for a truck in India. 50-60% of the revenue goes in fuel, right? Which is one problem, which may not be a problem in the US, is that the drivers who are employed by the owner, like they can steal fuel. And that's a leakage, right? Or let's say a truck is going to a fuel station and it is trying to fill 100 liters of fuel. The petrol station only fills 90 or 90.
Sure.
So the leakage is everywhere, right? So ability to curb these leakages, that's an opportunity, right? Then in the area of dashcam, which popularly in the West are known for safety of the drivers in terms of driving, etc. In India, it's actually finding a good, USP in terms of cargo safety. Because what happens is if there's a cargo in the truck and that cargo is stolen, the driver is blamed for it. And the owner has to pay the bill for that, right? So if we can have a dash cam which looks into the body of the truck, really, it reduces, it essentially does the RCO of who stole, effectively, right?
Sure.
So basically, these are more, I would say, the levers or the objectives with which some of these are getting implemented in the Western world versus why they get implemented in India are going to be different. And the purchasing power is again a big difference.
So both use cases and form factors, I mean, it will be similar, they'll rhyme, but
it will be very different applications and different industries, right? So I think it's happening, but it's going to be slow. It's going to be it's going to take its own time, and it has to be very affordable, and it needs to have the bang for the buck.
it's like everything.
Yeah, it's like everything.
Bang for the buck and Blackbuck, they rhyme.
Yes.
You've been spending some time in the US now. US logistics market, commercial trucking market is similar to India in certain ways, maybe in terms of ownership and, smart fragmentation.
Trucking is fragmented globally. In US, less than or equal to 20 truck ownership is like 90% of the trucks. In India, less than or equal to 5 is like 80% of the trucks. In China, less than or equal to 1 is 80%. China is like super fragmented.
Wow.
Europe, less than or equal to 10 is 80%. So everywhere, trucking is fragmented. And yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And so I was going to ask, I mean, on those lines, like, when you look at, this market, you meet entrepreneurs here, or going after, let's call it building, rebuilding logistics, with user technology. Are there any opportunities you see? Or you're excited about?
So, being very candid, I think I have done few immersions with customers in terms of truck operators here, but really not too much, I would say. So probably, my understanding of this market is a little not so much deeper. But I mean, like anything in the US happens in a very responsive and a quick way. Things shift like in years, right? And transformations in India take a long time. My journey here to sort of really understand is to really learn what's really happening, how people are building products, how people are incorporating AI in their solutions. I think the trucking industry from a transactions perspective is still operates on pen and paper mechanisms here. I think that's still yet to be disrupted. And the hard part about trucking is that every economy will have its own go-to-market in terms of how it will get disrupted. I think the problem is similar. Some companies have tried doing it, have not been fully successful. I think, I mean, it's still out there to really figure out who can really disrupt the US truck market.
And what are you taking away from this trip? Because, you've been meeting a bunch of
So this trip was more for me, one of our very strong supporters and our investors was having their LP meeting. And they were supposed to be there.
Sure.
That's what brought me to the US. And along with that, now that we are a public company, most of the money in the private market for us was from the US, United States, and even in the public market, United States continues to be a very strong pool of capital for tech companies from India. So a lot of more meeting people and spending time. And what are my learnings? Learnings are. I think whenever you land in the United States, you see the pace of things. I think things happen pretty fast. Things happen pretty seamlessly. I think Waymo probably started commercial opportunity a year back. That was pretty fancy.
Yeah.
Every time I got into Waymo, I recorded myself, right, getting into it, right. That experience was really great because things are moving really fast, right. And so I mean, I would say really not a very startup ecosystem perspective, but I think the list of things which I did here.
Yeah, very cool. You mentioned you're a public company now, and we've kind of known each other a little bit from when you started off as a regular startup, and born out of Koramangala and what have you. What is different now running a public company?
Yeah, so I think running a public company, when you're running a private company and you transition to a public company, right? There are two dimensions, in which assuming that you are, let's say, a bit sorted. Like, let's say, first dimension is really about the business model, what you have, right? What's the predictability of that business model, both from perspective of revenue and profits, right? And the second dimension is basically the narrative with which you're building and how you have really guided your investors into the public markets, right? I think if these two things are a bit sorted, I think the journey into public markets is really more of a compliance and a process journey than really anything changing in the life of the entrepreneur, right? We went public broadly at the inflection point of our profitability, where I think the best days in terms of profitability were like ahead of us. And because of the kind of foothold we have in terms of in our industry, in terms of user market share, user recall, and the kind of brand we've been able to build among truckers in the country, right? Any new initiative, if you're trying to go aggressive behind it, doesn't really entail a lot of burn, right? So I think for us, God's been kind, touch wood. I think we've transitioned into a public company, when I think making really good profits, when our roadmaps in terms of what we're building is, pretty much very clear, right? And predictability of the business is, very high. And the ability to invest in new businesses has been like probably the 10x aggressive it has ever been before, right? So I think that's this little bit of color on, us and us transitioning into public. But yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, in the early part, right? What we haven't got to till now is that we just created a platform which people use, and we're a great, we're a good company which people like, people love. But I think really the transition of a company from good to great is yet to happen. Where we're going to really transform the industry. I think that's probably the story of the next 10 years, and that story we will undergo being a public company.
That's very interesting, and it's as a venture capitalist, it's great to hear profits and cash flow driven experimentation, and not just equity driven experimentation. So that's actually quite interesting. I want to go all the way back. You were at IIT in Chennai.
I was in Kharagpur.
You're in Kharagpur. Okay, sorry guys. So you're in Kharagpur, and you like, how did Blackbuck happen for you? I know you guys you were in ITC for a little while as well with some of the other incredible people. So how did this even happen?
So, Kharagpur, 5 years undergrad in metallurgy, right? 2010, on campus job with ITC, and little bit of ops exposure before that, a bit of shop floor internship in Rio Tinto, Alcan in Germany, and a bit of logistics internship with Schindler Lifts and Elevators in Mumbai, where I drove a truck for the first time. After that, the real hardcore logistic experience was ITC. And I was hired by this gentleman called Sanjeev Rangras,
Of course,
on campus,
the legend.
Mohin, right? And I was in his office for 2 years, first 2 years. He gave me the project of transforming supply chain of the business which he was leading.
The agri business.
The agri business, the leaf tobacco business, erstwhile, right? So that's how my entire tryst with logistics happened. Fast forward to my 4 years of experience in logistics at ITC, because the last 1 year at ITC was more general management role in the foods business. In the first 4 years, fast forward, we were able to help ITC's leaf tobacco business save 25% of its supply chain costs.
Wow.
And simple levers we used were: truck in the country runs for 15, 16 days. How can it run more? How do you sweat the ass up more? How do you use the right truck type for a particular lane, right? How do you optimize? How do you never run a truck run empty? How do you schedule loads that the truck runs effectively, right? How do you directly go to the truck operator, right? So we use simple economic levers like to make it happen. By the end, we were able to implement this across like 30, 35 different lanes. So by the end, the whole summary of this was that if we could do this at ITC scale, and the macro narrative in India has always been that logistics is bottleneck, logistics is super inefficient, right? How can we do this at India scale? So that was like the birth of idea of Blackbuck, and the rest is obviously history.
That's very interesting. And a bunch of people listening are actually maybe aspiring entrepreneurs, or maybe in different stages of completing their engineering degree or whatever else they're doing these days. I mean, if you look back, and you and I were chatting a little bit about this, there's kind of like no deterministic path that a founder takes to finding their mission. If you had to advise these people, like, what would you say? Like, or if you look back, things that were happy accidents, but then
So basically, one uniform thing across, I think, all founders, and uniform thing you can put it across is like the burning fire, right? The fire to really do something, right? I mean, I think that you have to be aware whether that, let's say, because the only thing which is true is that building a company is tough. And the only thing which basically rests with you in those tough times is the fire and the motivation to what you're doing. So I think that's like the basics, because if you are not motivated enough, it's going to be a very hard time to go through it, right? Now, on top of this, I think entrepreneurial journey can take different form factors. I was a customer to the problem, and then I was solving my pain point by building Blackbuck, right? For somebody, it's an idea which people iterate through and get to a spot where they are building for a particular market, right? I think what is, I would more pick out the boxes which should not be the motivations, right? I think a lot of people start off to become their own boss. I just feel that, it's one of the very lowest order motivating factor, because you would realize that when literally managing people is all about reporting into them than they report into you, right? So it's a very inverse thing. People think that they can be their own boss. It actually works the opposite, right? And so I think the motivation factors is going to be really, like
Maybe
that.
maybe the spirit of the question was a little bit more in terms of like, if people are looking to start something, assuming they have the right raw material,
Okay.
the right motivations, like what are some of the things they should do to sort of, accelerate that process of finding that thing? Is it, take time off and like, go work in a, with a bunch of interesting people? Is it,
Just start.
just start?
Just start. Because
Just do it.
Yeah, just do it, right? I mean, like, there's a problem, you have the intrinsic motivation, then nothing stops you from cracking it. Just go ahead.
Sound
I
right.
mean, there's no recipe. If somebody feels a recipe that working somewhere is perfect, because that's what is adding to their ammunition to solve it.
Yeah.
The form factors can take anything. I mean, it's like probably there can be a million form factors. I think the reason I was trying to answer it in terms of the intrinsic motivation, etc., is because I think there is always a point in time where the penny falls in your mind that you just go at it, right? I think I would only say that just wait for that. Don't force yourself into it. And then when the penny falls, then you're just ready. Just do it. Just do it.
You know when you're
Exactly. You'll know when you're ready. Yeah. It's not that there's a form factor which can be really prescribed to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Right. Just one other thing I wanted to ask you was, you've had a pretty incredible track record of hiring people who have then gone on to become incredible entrepreneurs in their own right. I mean, Srinath is one example of that, and I'm sure there are many others. As you look back, it's unusual to see that kind of entrepreneurial density in one company. In hindsight, have there been certain characteristics or behaviors that, you were looking for that you felt fostered this?
Yeah. So basically, I have I've run Blackbuck in like two different phases, right? The first phase used to be really just get the best talent, right? And best context is more defined by how society defines it in terms of
Logos,
resumes, experience, and all that, right? And the second one is basically who's right for this job, right? And in the first one, it's become a more probabilistic ratio in terms of X percentage has worked. That number is a little on the lesser side, probably 30-40%, right? In the second one, that hit rate is way higher, right? But then again, it's important to note that in the first phase, we were figuring it out. In the second phase, we knew what it is, and then we knew what's the right way to do it, right? So I think this question is pretty tricky, because I think the only unifying thing across people who ended up making a difference at Blackbuck and who also ended up doing well after that is basically people who always wanted to create true impact and are not really chasing either a fake metric or are not trying to live from a month to a month. They're literally buying into the idea of really truly disrupting and transforming a space, and they believe that this will happen. And see, my framework is that I believe that, like, broadly, I think being more than 7 on 10 on capability probably is like you've optimized 90% of capability. Beyond that, it's much of muchness. And after that, it's going to be really choosing the right problem and really working very hard, right? Because the difference between a 8 and a 9, like let's say in the ecosystem, when you're figuring things out and you're trying to really crack at go at big mega projects, rarely creates an outcome difference. But difference between a guy who can work hard, on a scale of 10, 4 on 10 versus 9.5 on 10, or versus 8 on 10 versus 9.9 on 10, there's a remarkable difference.
And so to sort of clarify, to phrase what I'm hearing, you're saying you're obviously looking for 7, 8, 9s, but that
Exactly.
doesn't make so much of the difference. But what
Yes.
makes the difference is the ambition to
Really make it
impact
happen
and
right?
work hard.
Work harder. That makes an impact.
Yeah.
And working hard, I think working hard gets very tougher to move from 9 to 9.5. Because being in the top 5 percentile or work hard versus being in the top 10 is very different, right? And people who are in the 99 percentile, generally they look very magical that they've got it right, but it's just that they work too hard to get there, right? So I think because the journey of creating a company is more hard work, more iterations, more grit, and more of motivation to really making it happen versus being super smart.
Yeah.
That's the playbook which has worked in the context of trucking for us, because trucking is a hard space.
Yeah. I mean, I sometimes when we meet founders, we often, when we're deep in discussions of their product or their business, sometimes I ask them, it's like, gee, like, it should be easier to make money. It doesn't have to be this complicated. And I think what you're describing sounds a little bit like that, which is, ultimately it's at the end of the day, you have the capabilities. It doesn't have to be the absolute top guy, but if you have the right combination with intent and hard work, then you kind of get there.
So we've always sided by the right intent and ability to work hard.
How do you look for that? Intent in particular, I guess. What
Intent, if you're asking me, my biggest marker of intent is every discontinuity in their career journey. Understanding the motivations behind that has helped me understand the intrinsic motivation. Generally, when let's say a person moves from a company A to B, when a person is moving from the campus from college to a company, like when a person is choosing a particular career, right? A person is doing something, person is taking a break, person is, so I think the intrinsic feel gives you an understanding of really what this person optimizes for in life in general. Generally gives me a bit of feel of that. And, hardworking is more probably through referencing and with the feel of it. Yeah.
Hard work you probably know from the impact they've had or what they're
Or you talk to people.
Yeah.
Correct.
Intent is really hard too.
Yeah, exactly.
We're not pretty good at asking intent as well.
Yeah, and I think interviewing is very hard way to figure that out. I think the only way to figure it out is doing blind referencing and people who can really, give you honest opinion. And again, referencing, talking to people about people, again, is hard because everybody has very positive intent for majority. So even if a person is 3, the person gives a reference of 4, 4.5. Yeah. Right?
So you're sort of handicapping everything back to where they really are.
Yes.
Do you have any favorite questions you ask when you're referencing people?
One question which typically makes people, a little think, many times is that, because many times I find roles being very irrelevant. I just ask, why did your role exist? Right?
Why did your role exist?
Why did you exist basically in that company?
Yeah.
Asked in a polite way, why did your role exist?
Yeah.
You understood, right?
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because it just gets morphed in between so many functions and intersections and verticals and horizontals.
They had to almost zoom out and see
what will not happen if you don't exist, right?
Yeah.
That many times, 30, 40 years, the people can't answer that question.
Interesting.
Their role might be very sophisticated, but they don't really know why they exist. Right? And I really like the honesty that people say that you're actually right, my role actually needn't have been there. Some people answer that question.
Interesting.
I get that answer pretty frequently.
Yeah. Well, we know a big technologist here in the Valley who loves getting rid of jobs. So reminds me of him. But you spoke about 2 phases, right? When we were figuring out and then when we did figure out. Maybe I just want to touch on that very briefly because I remember there was a blitz scale part of your journey, which was driven by a slightly different business, and then maybe post COVID and post let's call it Zerk, right? There was a little bit of a moment of reckoning and a restart or a pivot or a reemergence. Maybe just describe that for people who don't know the story, and then how has that impacted your view on product market fit?
Yeah. So basically, We started off because of the experience from ITC, which is one of the CPG companies in India. Uh, our first product market fit basically, came into being in the area of saying that for enterprises, we will solve trucking, right? Because I was an enterprise, I was a consumer of the service,
See.
and I wanted to solve for enterprises that, right? That particular product market fit, I would say that we thought we had a product market fit, but 2015, the VC ecosystem in India was pretty vibrant. You could raise money
Sure.
easily and well. So literally, I would say that we bought the product market fit, right?
And for people who don't know, like, what were you doing at that time?
Helping Unilevers and Coca-Colas of the world get access to trucks via our platform. And with them, we have contracts and we would, get truckers on a spot rate basis, right? And then make a difference in terms of the commission, right? There, it was very hard to build truck operator supply because every 100 truck operators we would, get on board, they would like in 6 months churn out because of the classical market, matchmaking problem. Because when they wanted a load, we didn't have a load because of scale, and when we had a load, we didn't have them, right? So very heavily reliant on intermediary brokers to place trucks at that point in time. So we could never build supply. The second biggest thing was that in India, enterprises don't pay money on time. And if they say they want to pay in 30, 40 days, they end up paying 100, 120 days, right? So collections was a big problem. So these two problems resulted in like we losing a lot of cash, right? And the model was basically scaling only on behind of cash losses, right? So we knew when we were, so obviously we ran this for like 3 to 4 years. When we were essentially going into COVID, is that we realized that this model is really not scaling, right? So pausing here and commenting on really the context on product market fit, right? Product market fit, if it's getting bought, it's not going to survive.
So if you're discounting or you're, giving freebies.
So basically, it's a empty calorie growth,
Sure.
which doesn't have a muscle, which can't stand up on its own,
Sure.
right? So, so basically, we knew those problems. And while we were building this out, we were already solving for truck operators, saying that what can we solve for them so that they can use technology, they can use the mobile app, and they can go online and solve their problems. Because we knew that matching is hard, so let's give them something which make them active on the app continuously, right? And when this essentially did not work, like you can obviously it's sort of a pivot, but it's actually evolution of the model into saying that we were essentially solving an enterprise trucking problem where we were solving the problem of getting a load for a trucker. Now we need to evolve into saying that not only load, let's solve everything for a trucker, right?
So the customer changed from the enterprise
to the trucker. And that for the trucker, let's solve for payments where he can go cashless, he can reduce leakages. Let's solve for telematics and control over the driver, etc. Right? So that's the shift we made in 2019, 2020, where customers shifted, as you rightly said. And the entire go-to market in terms of solving for loads changed into first, let's solve for essential use cases, which are like, big technology developments in the country. Government mandated electronic tolling and truckers needed a bandwagon to jump onto to move into electronic tolling. Like the ELD movement for the US, right? So that helped us to get our first 100,000 users who were using our software, right? And, as we got first 100,000 users, and then basically we were able to solve our distribution, which is again a very unique way because we have truckers in India are like middle-aged people who more often than not are fleeced by businesses, but they don't have really good schemes for them, right? So ability to build trust with them could not be done digitally or through a call center. We had to really land on the ground, hire people who speak their language and build that trust, right? So first 100,000 users on payments, the next 100,000 users on telematics, right? First 100,000 users took like 3 years. Second 100,000 users took like 22 months. Like for telematics, right? For telematics, it took 22 months. Then when we launched loads on top of this in the year 2023 around, right? Loads took like 9 months to 800,000 users, right? And Loads in a newer avatar of like more a platform-led approach. So, so this is the transformation which essentially happened, right? And obviously, as you rightly pointed out, right? Really, product market fit, like always appears as I would say, you know, like all that. I would say that the entire approach to product market fit is, you know, uh, like we've every business and everyone has really defined it from either the context of user value prop, from the really empty calories versus muscle, right, etc. I would say that really few things which and it's very contextual because we are in a sector where the user is very cost conscious. User really wants bang for the buck because of very high value, right? So in our case, a product market fit like module, it is a truly module where there's very high user value prop. You are able to deliver this service at a particular price point in which you have already proven to make money, or you have reasonable confidence in terms of trajectory how you'll make money. So in our businesses till date, we've been able to hit product market fit when everything has been right in the business. Otherwise, the business doesn't make money actually even in the long term.
So like having this judgment of what will actually make money versus not, I think, and being true to yourself, right? Saying like, gee, am I buying product market fit or is this real product market fit? I think
Yeah.
is valuable. And I think, as a first time entrepreneur, make so many mistakes. I made so many mistakes. And so it's always obvious in hindsight, not in the moment when you're doing it.
Of course.
Any perspectives on sort of good investor founder relationships? You and I were chatting a little bit about the role of the investor, and there's so many sort of both great stories and horror stories of how and on why investors showed up in a certain way or cap tables or what have you. Like, I'm just curious from your perspective. You are now an investor in several companies as an angel, or even later on. So, if you had to advise a young investor, an investor in their career, like, what would you say?
I think 80 to 90% of I would say 90% of the effort for an investor probably, culminates at once you have put in capital in the company, right? And what really, as an entrepreneur, we would look forward towards investors in terms of support is that, like, in crisis, can you help? Can you help with advice? Can you help with, opening doors, right? And one of the most favorite relationships with investors for me is more actually in the zone of a friend and a mentor who is always looking after you and providing, a good counsel whenever being reached out to, right? I think this is a framework which has really helped. And I think at the same time, when we hear such stories which are not pleasant, remember that, when you clap, it's two hands. It's not a single hand, right? So I think it's also a very important responsibility for the entrepreneurs to be able to be in like very intense communication with your investors. I think it's really very easy for entrepreneurs to communicate good news, but I think you end up delaying the bad news. I think if you become a person, you have the courage to communicate the bad news first and good news can actually wait, that really creates a lot of confidence with the investors. I think that was the Blackbuck style of doing it. And I think, yeah, I think these are some of the probably few points I have from how I was able to really build good friendships and good mentors on my cap table, and who continue to support me all throughout. And hard times, they were always stood by me. And and I think more often than not, they used to spend time with me when I was not doing that well.
So sort of showing up when things are not going well versus when things are
When things are going good, like
everybody is a cheerleader.
success has many fathers, failure has none. when you can father a failure, that's when the real material comes out, right? Yeah.
Maybe last question. What's the What's the one thing you're really looking forward to still on this trip?
Whenever I come here, I try out the more in things in SF.
Okay.
I think this time it's been a bit on the lesser side.
Okay.
I think whenever I turn up here, probably once Patagonia was a new thing. Then once Allbirds was a new thing.
Yes.
Right?
So new
I think
products.
New products like Vivo is a new thing now for me on this
Yes,
trip, right?
yes.
So I think anything like that, if you have something to suggest me, I would love to try that out.
Okay. What's the new fad? Is it I'm trying to think.
What's the new fad? Yeah. There's no fad.
There's no fad. I guess Apple Vision Pro is a little bit of a passing thing.
But that's, yeah.
It's a little too much.
Yeah. Too much on my pocket.
Try out. What else is like really
Hoka?
Hoka?
Hoka.
Hoka?
Shoes.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, Hoka shoes.
Yeah, Hoka shoes.
On, I think, has been much more popular.
On is already, there's been a decent time.
Okay, but okay.
Yeah, that's one thing which I think is on, but really, like, it's.
Oh, glucose monitors. Like it seems there's a whole bunch of people like going do
But
this
that's
like
that-
function health.
But that's 5 years back.
Yes.
And it's it has happened 5 years
Yes,
back.
but I guess we're seeing a lot more consumer brands built around that.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, so that's definitely one. I don't think what else. I mean, I can't think of much. Longevity, yeah, longevity is probably is a big focus. So I would say like it's interesting when we host sometimes young graduates for a technology event or whatever, and we ask them like, should we get pizzas and drinks? And they're like, no pizzas, no drinks. They're very healthy, so they drink sparkling water and,
Nice.
and maybe I don't know like sweet greens or something. So that I mean. It's good to see that, but also then surprise.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Rajesh.
Thank you so much.
It was lovely chatting as always it is, and have a good trip.
Thank you. Thank you so much.